Good morning. My name is Shannon. I'm Acting Vice-Chancellor of the University of Canberra this week for Professor Deep Saini. Good morning, Michelle.
Good morning, Francis.
Well, Michelle, this is the last sitting week of Parliament for the year, obviously a big week for the Coalition. How would you rate the government's performance in this last week?
It has, in this last fortnight, got through some significant legislation. It's industrial bills, which it took to the double dissolution. The first of those went through last week, and the Australian Building and Construction Commission's resurrection went through this week. I think it was really important for Malcolm Turnbull that he got those double dissolution bills through. He can say that the government has made some legislative achievements since the election. Apart from those, it's passed its superannuation changes and it's got some budget savings. So given the need to be seen to be delivering, I think that he would feel reasonably satisfied with these last couple of weeks, although the backpacker tax, which finally was clinched in a deal with the Greens, was a very messy process.
So this all appears to be very last-minute stuff. Do you think it's enough to show that the government have been performing in the times?
I think it's only a start. I think that the government next year will have to show that it can get more things done, and also that the things that it does get done are relevant to the average man and woman in the street, because they're concerned with what's done for their living conditions. They put a lot of emphasis on the state of the economy and issues like housing affordability, which is being discussed incidentally today by state and federal treasurers, and I think we'll see something in next year's budget on that, and also the health issue, where the government knows from the election that it's very vulnerable.
So there'll be a lot to do next year then for them. So to one of these particular items then, the ABCC legislation, how much did the government have to concede in order to get the crossbenchers to help pass this bill?
Well, quite a lot. It had to take some of the rougher edges off the legislation in terms of the rights that people have if they're hauled up for questioning. They will have more rights than the original bill envisaged. There's also a transition period for construction companies to come under the building code to get themselves compliant with that code. That transition period is a matter of great contention, and the hardliners have criticised the fact that that's been allowed rather than the original bill, which would have backdated compliance. So there were a lot of concessions, and of course there were some concessions that had nothing to do with the bill at all, and one of those was that the ABC has to have community forums, or at least its board does, which is a pretty odd sort of thing to be trading off for an industrial bill. But there you go. If the crossbenchers want something, these days they're likely to get it.
Yeah, there does seem to be a lot of horse trading going on at the moment. And of course, very last minute, the backpacker tax, as you said, was settled yesterday. And the Greens came to the rescue of the government to allow that 15% tax rate to go through. What do you make of that?
Well, the government will trade with anyone who's willing, and the crossbenchers had changed their mind, and there'd been quite a lot of toing and froing, but a deal couldn't be reached with them or with Labor for that matter. So the Greens approached the government, and what did they get out of it? They got $100 million for Landcare. So they weren't complaining.
Yeah, it seems like a good deal for them.
Indeed.
Finally, Attorney General George Brandis is facing another Senate inquiry. What is this new controversy that he finds himself embroiled in? He seems to be embroiled in controversies all the time.
This is a deal that the federal government did allegedly with the Western Australian government, not Senator Brandis, but Joe Hockey when he was Treasurer, over a tax arrangement. The WA government wanted to retrieve revenue from the collapsed bond Bell Empire, and the allegation is that the federal government gave it a clear run, or promised to give it a clear run, even though the Federal Tax Office, the Australian Taxation Office, had revenue itself it wanted to collect. Now, it's a very complicated story. The federal government says there was no deal, the WA government says there was a deal, and where George Brandis comes in is there's controversy over what sort of instructions he gave to the then Solicitor General Justin Gleeson, whether he in effect told him not to go too hard, not to run a certain constitutional argument, or whether he didn't, and he won't say what sort of briefing he gave him. And so for the second time within months, the Senate has set up an inquiry into the whole affair, but into Senator Brandis's actions in a particular issue. So it's not a good look for George Brandis, and some people in the government are hoping that next year he will be willing to bow out of politics, but we'll have to wait for a while to see whether that happens.
Okay, I guess we'll have to wait for a while for a lot more political things to happen next year. It's the end of the political year really now,
Almost.
and almost.
End of the session, but never quite the end of the year. And of course we have the mid-year update of the budget coming up in a couple of weeks, so that'll be one big item before Christmas.
Just before Christmas, and as you say, the affordable housing has been discussed today too, so more things to happen. Thank you, Michelle.
Thanks, Francis.
We'll see you again next week.